Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
When will Louisiana's economy finally reopen? What will it look like when it does? How long will it take before we're back to any sense of normal? We'll visit with Jason DeCuir, chairman of the Louisiana Advisory Task Force on Economic Recovery, when we return on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Louisiana businesses, by partnering with your local community and technical college foundation, you're guaranteed a skilled, highly competent workforce, homegrown talent, trained specifically to meet your needs, whatever those needs are. Visit this website to learn more about how to partner with your local Louisiana Community and Technical College Foundation. To better prepare for tomorrow, become a partner today.
At Optimal, we understand what's at stake during your projects. That's why we value integrity, trust, and expertise. We retain proven and experienced craftsmen, and with multiple locations, we can execute hundreds of customized project solutions across the country, so you stay ahead of schedule and under budget. At Optimal, you come first, plain and simple. We have your back, and we always deliver. Experience the Optimal difference.
Are you a licensed contractor? There's lots of good contractors in Louisiana doing work the right way, but unfortunately, too many unlicensed contractors are working outside the licensing requirements. Working as a contractor in Louisiana requires a license for the company doing the work. The Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors wants to help you get licensed to allow you to conduct work legally. It's not difficult to get the license. We can help you. Go to lacontractor.org for more information. Licensed contractors, it's the law.
For 8 seconds in the arena before an afternoon in the field. For a promise to students that honors success in the classroom. For championships earned on the bayou. For innovators committed to reclaiming our coastline. The Universities of Louisiana. For your future. For our future.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Very pleased to be joined by a good friend, guy I've worked with for a long time. Jason DeCuir is a principal at Ryan, and he's also been selected as the chairman of the Louisiana Advisory Task Force on Economic Recovery. Buddy, welcome.
Thank you, Tim.
Glad you're here. Let's start with a little background on you.
Sure.
You've got a long history, a deep history of working in both government and the business sector here. I think your skill set and your experience is unique. Talk to us about it.
Well, thank you, Tim, and appreciate being on your show. Obviously, I grew up here in Baton Rouge, and much like yourself, grew up playing sports and competing, and that launched me into college, and I actually competed in college, playing football and kicking field goals. But when I got back, I knew business, and the business side of things is where I wanted to go. I ended up getting my MBA from Louisiana Tech and my law degree from LSU, and then went on to Georgetown and specialized in tax law. And I knew sort of that business tax combination is where I wanted to be. You know, if you're working with businesses, the tax piece is so critical in the number of things they do. And then clerked with Judge Palazoa here. And then really my foray into state and local taxes. Under the previous administration, I got a call and challenge to look at tax reform for Louisiana. And you can imagine that is opening that up and looking at how to proceed with tax reform, was an incredible exercise.
You currently now are a principal with an organization called Ryan. 2 questions about Ryan. Number one, tell us a little bit about what your company does, because I think that's important. But also tell us how you and your team have been able to remain productive during this stay-at-home order.
Yeah, well, Ryan is a global company that primarily operates in the state and local tax space. And in layman's terms, if there is a state or local tax that any state has on its books, we're experts in it, from property tax to sales tax to credits and incentives to excise, motor fuels, we mine in it. Specifically, what I do in the southeast part of the country, we represent a lot of manufacturers, oil and gas companies, just industry across the board. And as they get into a large disputes about the right amount that should be paid, as well as legislative type items, is this law clear enough such that the company can actually follow the law? And so that's such a big deal that we holistically, and I, part of Ryan, holistically work those issues for those businesses such to give them clarity going forward so that they can invest more time in doing what they do and creating their product and trying to navigate the tax law.
You worry about the intricacies of tax law and how individual companies might comply with that law, and you let them worry about doing what it is that they do. Talk about your team and talk about what it's been like to try to stay productive during this COVID-19 stay-home order.
Yeah, well, fortunately at Ryan, we already had a program called My Ryan. So it was already moving to this new generation of allowing more flexibility in the workplace. And to recruit this new generation of employee coming out of college, they're used to flexibility and being able to operate on the fly a little bit more. So our CEO embraced that. We did have a policy where we are going to work entirely remotely, except if you were essential. And I think that helped with a couple of things. Obviously, complying with what the president wanted to do and social distancing, but it also helped us keep a safe and healthy workforce, because we weren't in contact with other folks. And I think the results have paid well for Ryan, but really we were able to get set up remotely as a company pretty quickly because we started to implement that over the last year or two.
How much of a long-term impact do you think this stay-at-home, work-from-home experiment is going to have?
Well, good question, and two parts to that. I think this is the new normal. I think that just in my everyday life, as I've been able to work at home, and the benefits of it, I spend more time with my wife, more time with my kids, but I'm also realizing how many flights I would have been on, how many meetings I would have gone to in various parts of the country in a given week. And I'm actually I feel like I'm able to accomplish if not as much, maybe even more, because it's one Zoom meeting to the next. And so I do think that this is going to be part of the new normal, and think about probably the cost and travel expenses and other expenses that it alleviates. But I do think, again, going and meeting individually is still going to be a major component of face-to-face business.
Let's turn our attention to both the state and the national economy. Now, you work in tax law. You've been to Georgetown. You've worked in government. You've worked in private business. You've got a really unique, I believe, perspective on this. I have to assume that you've never seen or even really thought about anything like what we've been through over the last 5 or 6 weeks.
No, that's exactly right. But since I got the call from the president and the speaker, I was already thinking about, just in my own specific area, what could I do? What are some things I could think of to help the legislature, the administration, anything to help Louisiana economy? It's where we're from, and we want to do everything we can, and started kind of looking at, some ideas, but never seen anything like this.
And its impact has been broad. I'm not sure we clearly understand at this point, Jason, where it's going to end up, what the long-term economic impact is going to be. But I want to take a break and then come back. And I want to talk about this Louisiana Legislative Advisory Task Force on Economic Recovery. As you mentioned, you've been named by the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House to chair that organization. A former legislator and now Mayor President of Lafayette Parish, Joel Robideau, is your vice chair. You selected him. But I want to get into the mission of that organization, what you see it as a result coming out of that whole initiative, and we'll talk about when we come back. We're visiting with Jason DeCuir. He's with a principal with Ryan, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Since 1919, we've designed and constructed hundreds of industrial plants, roads, ships, dams, and executed some of the most complex jobs in the world. In fact, our quality and dependability are legendary. Today, the legend continues as Brown & Root delivers engineering, construction, maintenance, and industrial specialty services throughout the U.S. and the world from our headquarters here in Louisiana. We are Brown & Root.
Welcome to Southwest Louisiana. 5 parishes working hand in hand to provide economic development, opportunity, and quality of life. $43 billion in projects underway, $65 billion in the pipeline, 18,000 construction workers, and 18,000 permanent jobs. It's all here. Welcome to Opportunity, the Southwest Louisiana Alliance.
Louisiana businesses, by partnering with your local community and technical college foundation, you're guaranteed a skilled, highly competent workforce, homegrown talent, trained specifically to meet your needs, whatever those needs are. Visit this website to learn more about how to partner with your local Louisiana Community and Technical College Foundation. To better prepare for tomorrow, become a partner today.
Gulf Coast Bank and Trust is giving our customers the power to bank anywhere, anytime during this challenging time.
It's about doing the right thing for our customers.
We're right there with you. Gulf Coast Bank is invested in technology with a local touch, a smart way to manage your money and your time. With our mobile banking app, you can make deposits, check balances, transfer money, pay bills, and more. Gulf Coast Bank and Trust, the bank that cares about you. Member FDIC. Message and data rates may apply.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Jason DeCuir is our guest. He is the chairman of the Louisiana Legislative Advisory Task Force on Economic Recovery. That's a mouthful, brother. As we sit here and tape on Tuesday, show airs on Sundays, the governor has just yesterday extended the stay-home order for 2 more weeks through May 15th. As a result of the stay-home order and sort of the shutdown of our economy, there have been 2 announcements of initiatives to help develop ideas on the best way to get our economy going again, restart it, get it to grow, get it back to where it is functioning. The governor announced his own initiative. It's the Resilient Louisiana Commission. And then the legislature announced its own initiative. They've asked you to be chair. State Senate President Paige Cortez and House Speaker Clay Schexnayder. Talk about how they first, Jason, reached out to you about the initiative, what your initial conversations were like, and then let's focus on the mission and what you guys hope to accomplish.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, the speaker and the president had reached out and just, hey, can you start thinking of some ideas around the tax and fiscal structure that we could immediately implement to help our Louisiana businesses out, right? You've got the federal government and the CARES Act and all of those provisions, but then you have to make sure those things link up to the state tax structure. And so I began to look at that, and that kind of morphed into, well, you talk to a few more legislators about that. And then I think as we're getting closer potentially to reopening the economy, you have to hear from the people on the ground, on the front lines. That's the businesses that are employing people. That's the restaurants that are feeding people. You need to hear from industries across all sectors. And so I think they said it would be great to get that input and feedback, because how will they know to go into the legislature and do all of the things necessary if they haven't heard from the people on the front lines who are employing and keeping Louisiana's economy going?
Interestingly, you guys have worked together now in a very short period of time, and I know you've worked some weekends straight through. I know how you and I have had a conversation about how quickly you've stood this task force up, and so it will report eventually back to a Louisiana Legislative Select Committee on Economic Recovery, with recommendations that can be put into legislation that eventually can be passed into law. The task force has, I think, 5 working groups, and I want to read them so that I don't mess these up. Ensuring public health and safety at work, Dr. Craig Green of the Public Service Commission is chairing that group. Supporting diverse industries across Louisiana's economy to grow and prosper, that's Stephen Wagasback of LBIS. encouraging long-term economic growth. Maura Donahue with Donahue Favret, a construction company out of Mandeville, but also chair of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Promoting jobs and opportunity for Louisiana, that is Nathalie Simon from Latrim Manufacturing. And then finally, removing obstacles to incentivize job creation and economic growth, Scott Poole of Royal Martin. So they have members of each of these work groups. They will meet weekly and deliberate, maybe more often if necessary. Yep. And they will come back with specific recommendations in each of those specific subject matter areas. Talk about how these task force were selected, how these chair people were selected, and your thinking going into this.
Yeah, first it was, wow, what an amazing group of intellectual power, right. In one setting. So, I had to remove the tax hat and put on the organizational hat. How in a short amount of time, because our final report is going to be due July 1, and they are going back into session probably in the first week here of May.
Literally 60 days to come up with.
And so they want ideas. And if you think about the people that I have at the table and the process, how the legislature works and where they are now, they're in session right now. And it's just been suspended because of the pandemic. Right. They're scheduled to go back in, and that's only going to go to June 1. So they need some ideas.
Constitutionally, they have to end this regular session by June 1. Now we expect a couple of special sessions.
That's right. So that's exactly how I thought about it, right. Tim. So we got to give them some ideas to immediately triage the situation. That's phase one. I put them into work groups that you've mentioned there with some great chairs. And they stepped up to the plate. They said, I'm running my business, but this is so important to us and to Louisiana. We cannot allow Louisiana to fail. So they stepped up to the plate. And we organized it in those phases. So the legislature is going to be looking to ideas when they go back at the beginning of March. So the first phase, March 7th, we'll start having some ideas for them to implement. And then we know it's likely that they'll go into a special session. That's phase two. We can now look at sort of that intermediate approach. And then phase three, which I'm super excited about because I've been grinding in that area all my professional life, is how do we want the new Louisiana economy to look? Long-term reform ideas and bridging the gap between those phases and creating a final report that we can build off of.
We got about a minute left in this segment, so I want to hit on that long-term part of what you've just asked about, because I believe it's critically important. We've all looked at Louisiana and said it can be so much more than it has been, and we've had a tax structure and a fiscal structure and a budgetary structure that has held us back. With about 30 seconds that we have left here, are you hopeful, are you optimistic about long-term systemic changes to the way Louisiana has traditionally done business?
I am, Tim, and I'll tell you why, for a couple of reasons. One, as you know, we just had turnover in the legislature. And a lot of the members of the legislature that are being seated now for the first time, that their first session got interrupted because of the pandemic, they ran on that. So they're hungry. They want to see a new Louisiana. The other thing is we always hear, you got to take a crisis and turn it into a positive. And that we have the opportunity right now to do.
Well, I think it really does, as difficult as it has been from a health perspective on our state, it really does give us an opportunity to look long-term and make those systemic changes that we have talked about but been unable to put into practice for so long. Let's take a break. Come back, we'll talk more about where this is headed. We'll talk about the long-term future. We're visiting with Jason DeCuir. He's chair of the Louisiana Legislative Advisory Task Force on Economic Recovery. You're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Tim Johnson here for the Louisiana Energy Export Association. LEA members are investing more than $60 billion in Louisiana's economy, creating more than 1,500 permanent jobs and 20,000 construction jobs. Louisiana is a global leader in energy export, and LEA is the voice of that industry. Check them out on their website to learn more.
For more than 25 years, the TJC Group has been helping industry communicate and build relationships with communities, elected officials, and governmental agencies. We are the leading firm in the U.S. for the development, management, and facilitation of industry-based community advisory panels.
Whether you're building a new facility or you manage an existing business, let us put our community and governmental relations experience to work for you.
The TJC Group, facilitating solutions for business and industry.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Jason DeCuir, who is a principal with Ryan and also chairing the Louisiana Legislative Advisory Task Force on Economic Recovery, is our guest. So we mentioned in the first segment that there are two commissions, so to speak, two task forces that have been set up. The governor has the Resilient Louisiana Commission. You're chairing the legislative version. I know there are a lot of conversations going on. I know that there are some folks who are serving on task forces, committees of both groups. How are we ensuring that we're not duplicating effort there?
Yeah, well, if you think about the way that our Louisiana government is set up, by definition, it's not duplication. The legislature is in charge and in control of passing legislation. And so if you think about it, and you want ideas, we just talked about earlier that they're in the middle of the session, you have to have a legislator to file an instrument. And so what we are doing is taking businesses, again, who employ people on the front lines of getting our economy running, getting their ideas and getting them to legislative leadership so that they can be filed instantaneously to help with some of the relief efforts. So that's why it is so imperative and why I really thank the president and the speaker for including business and making sure that their voice is heard when they go back into the legislature.
I suspect you could look at it from the perspective that more good ideas, always better than fewer good ideas, right? And so if you've got two task forces with a lot of talented people out there working on good ideas, that's a good thing. Let's switch to what this is going to look like, Jason, once we get through this process and we get through this stay-home order and we actually do get this economy going. You're chairing a group from a legislative perspective, as we've discussed here over and over, that is going to make recommendations both short-term and long-term for our economy. But as we've mentioned a couple of times, you've been in this game for a number of years yourself. What do you expect it to look like both short-term and long-term as we begin to recover?
You know, Tim, we're used to seeing hurricanes and natural disasters around Louisiana, and we're strong people, and we're used to recovering from that. The unfortunate news is that this is going to be different than all of that. Normally, it's one part of the state helping out another part of the state. The entire state is impacted. Nobody is spared at the state, federal, or even globally. It has had an impact. So I think it's going to be hard to tell what are going to be the exact short-term needs, but that's why we have businesses on the front line who are hearing from their employees, who are trying to reopen, and as these nuances are coming up, we want to give them the life raft, the lifeboat, to get their business back up. And if you think about it, it's a win-win game. If the business opens up and can employ people, then the state and local coffers are going to be doing better too. For every business that shuts down or goes out of business or that can't continue, then that's lost revenue to the state and local. So there has to be a relationship to do that. Long term, I don't think anybody knows what the new normal is going to be. We just talked about Zoom meetings. I think that's going to become more of a natural thing. But we need to be looking at the long term. The one thing that I mentioned earlier, and I can't harp on enough, is that I do think this gives us an opportunity to start looking at those long-term reforms, because anytime you have a disaster of this proportion, it really casts the shadow on Louisiana about some of the fixes that we need to our system.
Well, and we mentioned it, I think, in the last segment, and folks who are regular viewers of this show are probably tired of hearing me say it, but this state has so much unrecognized potential. Yeah. More, I believe, than any other place in the United States, and quite frankly, more than a lot of places that we compete with around the world. If we can finally put our fiscal house in order, if we can finally put our budgetary house in order, if we can finally begin to attack the root cause of poverty, which is so debilitating to this state and to its people, I believe that we can begin to realize the wonderful potential that is represented by Louisiana. I know you feel the same way. I know you're going to drive this commission toward those sort of things.
No, that's absolutely right. That's why I'm so excited about phase 3. Because obviously we need to get one done immediately. That's the immediate life raft to businesses who every day it becomes a greater and greater challenge that we're sheltered in place and they can't reopen. And remember, this wasn't any fault of the business owners. These were orders that said, hey, you had to shut down or you can't serve the number of people. That's right. And so they need to be helped out and try to be made whole. And then as that segues into the longer term ideas, that's really where I think the rubber meets the road for a better and more vibrant Louisiana economy.
Well, listen, I believe that the legislature's picked the right guy for the job. I've known you for a long, long time. I've got a lot of faith in you, a lot of confidence in you. I know your character. I know that you're going to put your heart and soul into this and you're going to lead this with great distinction. I believe that. If I'm watching this show, Jason, and I say, you know, I'd like to have some input there, or I'd like to at least follow more closely what they're doing. We're going to put the website for the commission up on the screen here, but talk about engagement from the community.
Well, we want it. Obviously, you can't have a task force of 1,000 people, right? So we only had, but I'm asking for people, if they need to come before the task force and talk about their industry or something going on in their part of the state. We had all the chambers come and give a presentation from what's going on in various parts of the state. We want your input. That's why the meetings are going to be public. We're going to have a website. We're going to put all the information out there. We're going to give public an opportunity to chime in because we need their ideas. We're all in this together, Tim.
We're going to be watching it closely, buddy. Good luck. Get after it. Do well for our state. I know you will. And we'll have you back on to talk more about it sometime soon.
Thank you so much, Tim.
That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Stay safe and healthy out there. And join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.